Religion, a belief or ideology centered around the supernatural. I, of course, deal with many religious people, but mostly from the same vein of theism, specifically Abrahamic monotheism, so Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. So it's interesting to see how people of religious persuasions existing outside of these three religions with their shared origin, compared to what we've come to expect, which is why I'm happy to present today's video by Darryl Sloan, titled simply as Proof of a Higher Power. Let's get right to it.
So I'm going to call this video Proof of a Higher Power, or something to that effect. I could call it Proof of God, but that would be misunderstood, because most people think of God as an anthropomorphic being, a sky god, a human-like father figure, and of course that's ridiculous. But the word God has been used historically in a more abstract and intelligent sense, such as how it's used in deism or pantheism, and I do consider myself a pantheist.
Whilst I do believe that there has to be some sort of defining quality to a deity, and I take many issues with the ideas of pantheism on that basis, if you want to define your deity as some supernatural force permeating throughout the universe, then I'm more than happy to discuss your apparent evidence for such a force. Whilst it may not exactly relate to my atheism, it certainly relates to my secular humanism, which holds to the fact that science is currently the best method for investigating the way in which our universe functions, and currently all the data wrought from said method has pointed to solely naturalistic forces. But part of science is revision, and part of revision is approaching claims of new evidence with an open yet skeptical mind.
So this is why I don't like the term atheism, because in atheism the question of whether there is a higher power is left unanswered, and I get the impression that most people who call themselves atheists subscribe to the notion that there isn't a higher power, that there's just this, that somehow we're going to understand the entire universe in terms of what we can detect about it, in terms of what's reachable by human intelligence, and there's only this, nothing more.
Except it does answer whether a person believes in a higher power, if by higher power we mean some sort of deity. The problem is, we need to come to an agreed standard on what makes a deity a deity. For me, some level of consciousness is required, otherwise your supernatural force will just become indistinguishable from any natural force we observe, outside of the fact that your supernatural force had yet to be proven to exist. I wouldn't refer to gravity as a god, and if you do, I would argue that you've watered down said word to the point of obscure uselessness. God has no meaning. May as well discard of it.
And we see that view extrapolated in theories like, the multiverse. And it's like, we have to answer the problem of why everything is so ordered in this universe. So we get around it by inventing many, many universes that all exploded outwards into separate dimensions, if you like, at the Big Bang. They all had different laws of physics. It was all very random. And the vast majority of them were dysfunctional and ended very soon after their creation. And the one that we're in happens to be the one where the conditions were just right to support things like solar systems and life. It's the old, it's like the face in the teacup or the face in the tea leaves. You can see patterns that aren't really there, or it's like a very sophisticated expression of that old argument that you sometimes hear in theism, in monotheism, that if you if you get enough monkeys with enough typewriters and enough time, like an infinite duration of time, sooner or later one of those monkeys turns out the complete works of Shakespeare by sheer chance. It feels like that kind of an argument. If you just give yourself enough universes, one of them will work. I don't buy it. I think it's coming from the wrong place. It's coming from an aversion to any kind of acceptance that there's a higher power.
Your understanding of multiverse is wrong on so many levels, it's really difficult to know where to begin. I think the biggest problem though is the fact that you're treating many different perspectives of multiverse and how such a model operates as one collective hypothesis. It's really not. Outside of the shared trait that there are many universes, the perspectives beyond that point begin to diverge dramatically. Now, some suggest that said universes would be completely self-contained. Others suggest that they may have a measurable impact on one another, whilst others say that the interactions between two or more universes may even have the capacity to create more universes. Now, it's an interesting hypothesis which some scientists are seeking to try and verify through scientific experimentation, but it was in no way created for the purpose you pretend. There was no problem of, quote, why everything is so ordered in this universe, end quote, that needed answering, otherwise the claims of religion is justified as you seem to be pretending here. There is no, quote, aversion to any kind of acceptance that there is a higher power, end quote, as you are claiming. Science is investigating multiverse not to avoid the conclusions of theism, but because unlike theism, it's a hypothesis with potentially testable merit. And yet multiverse being right or wrong has no impact on the existence of God. Multiverse, along with every alternative naturalistic hypothesis we currently have, could be wrong. But none of that, I repeat, none of that would act as basis to claim that God existed. It'd mean one thing and one thing only. We don't know yet.
But we actually don't need to feel that aversion because there is proof that there is a higher power. And that proof comes from mathematics, right? And the best example of this, I think, is the number pi. 3.14, etc., 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 also expressed as 22 over 7. But whether you express it as a fraction or a decimal, in both cases it's an approximation of the true value of pi. Pi is the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. And it can't be bound. It can't actually be given a value. It just goes on and on and on. And I think at this point, several trillion values have been uncovered of the actual decimal value of pi. Several trillion decimal places it's been worked out to. Not a single one of those decimals is random, and yet you can't pick out a repeating pattern in it either. It's not like 3.333333, and it's always going to be 3, a third, or 0.33333, it's a third of 1. Pi just keeps on going, and you can keep on going forever. It's what's called a transcendental number. Now, there's a word you don't hear often talked about in physics, the idea of something being transcendent. And yet in mathematics, we call pi a transcendental number, with good reason, because you can't get to it here within space-time. That's a really amazing thing if you think about it. There's something real, you know it's there, and you can't get at it. You see? Am I going too far in saying that this is proof of a higher power?
Absolutely. The fact that we label real non-algebraic numbers transcendental numbers has no relation to the existence of some higher power beyond your pure assertion. It is a non sequitur. Fact A does not equal conclusion Z. Look, I could piss in a bottle and rename the contents of said bottle the tears of God, but the fact that I referred to said contents by said name wouldn't in any way validate the existence of a God. The same is true of transcendental numbers. The use of transcendental doesn't in any way validate the existence of a spiritual realm any more than my tears of God validate the existence of a God. It's a name that we Homo sapiens arbitrarily gave something, not evidence of the existence of the supernatural. So if all you have are semantic games, then I can tell you, I'm going to get bored very quickly.
Now, someone argued against me in the past on this matter, and they said that there's no such thing as a perfect circle in nature. Therefore, there's no such thing as the actual value of pi, right? But that's kind of getting the cart before the horse, because it's like saying first came the cube and then came the geometry that makes up the cube. You see, it's the other way around. First there's the geometry of the cube, and it's those mathematical laws that are holding the cube in the shape that the cube is, in the same way that it's mathematical laws like the number pi that makes up the circle. In other words, every imperfect circle that you find in nature is utterly dependent on the fact that the number pi is a reality. You see?
I do indeed see. I see one fool who doesn't understand the basics of mathematics. Mathematics is a language, and as a human language, was created to convey information. Mathematics doesn't hold reality together, but it helps us describe certain forces. We can take things we observe and transcribe them into math, but math is merely the language and the method we use to understand these principles in a limited fashion. So the only way math can prove the existence of the supernatural would be for it to transcribe said supernatural, doing so through the methodology of science.
I mean, this fills me with a real sense of the profound, but I feel that it's very hard to get people to realize just how big a deal this is. There is something here. It's real. You can get the edge of it, but you can't get the whole thing. But you know the whole thing is there, out of reach. It's so out of reach that if you gave yourself an infinite duration of time, you could not get to the end of it. Therefore, there is something that transcends the whole notion of time as... Oh, I'm losing my words. The whole notion of time as something that can be bound. There must be the unbound, whatever that is. There's an aspect of reality that we might call the unbound, the infinite. It's absolutely real.
Okay, now you're just resorting to pure word salad. Literally, none of what you said had any meaning whatsoever. How does the existence of pi prove the supernatural? You still haven't overcome that barrier. Unless you do that in the next several minutes of your video, all you have done is gone, pi exists, therefore higher power, which is not going to convince me or any reasonable person of anything besides the existence of your wishful thinking.
See, people think that the notion of infinite regress is a problem. That's usually applied to creation. So you start with something and then you ask, where did that come from? So you jump to something else, typically to God. But you just jump to something else and then you have to ask, well, where did that come from? And you jump to something else. Where did that come from? And you jump to something else. And on it goes. It's an infinite regress. And people think that that is a problem. Like it shouldn't be. It's not a problem because you can actually demonstrate that there is an infinite regress in nature, and it's right there in the number pi. You just go deeper and deeper into it and it goes on forever. And I mean a literal forever. It's transcendental in nature. And yet every one of the digits within it is absolutely real. No matter how deep you go or how much time you invest in it. And by time, I'm not talking about a human life. I'm talking about trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of years, right? It's something that we can't even imagine. Time will just keep rolling out those digits of pi. They come from somewhere. They come from the infinite, from the unbound.
Evidence of this, please, because currently we are still stuck with pi exists and was arbitrarily called transcendental. So what? Also, it's not infinite in that the number is growing in size. The decimal of pi will always continue, but the value of pi will never grow to be 3.15 or greater. Pi will forever be smaller than 3.15.
They come from that higher power that is above everything that is tangible here in this. So it's like everything you can see and touch is like a subset of the infinite. A subset of the unbound. And to me, that's wondrous, because I recognize that this higher power is not something I ever get to understand, yet I have an implicit trust in its reality. The kind of atheism, if you can call it atheism, that I subscribe to is one that feels a deep, intimate connection to a profound mystery at the heart of everything. And I wonder how many atheists feel that. Because I have a feeling that it's more of a kind of a dead view of reality than one that is hopeful and vibrant. And you see what I'm getting at here? Pi proves that there is a higher order to reality. It is an order that you cannot understand, but it is an order that you are absolutely able to trust. That this game we're all engaged in down here isn't without some kind of ultimate reason, but you can't get your hands on that really. But it's there. Doesn't mean there's an afterlife, doesn't mean any of that stuff. It just means that everything is working the way it's supposed to, and it's not an accident. It wasn't the case that there were millions and millions of universes and you happen to exist in the one that worked. There is something much deeper in play. And that's why I prefer the term pantheism over atheism. Pan means all, theos means God. It's just the idea that God is everything. God is not a character. This is all divine. This is all a subset of the divine, and we don't know what the divine is. It's just higher than this.
So you believe in garbage and believe one has to share in your belief in said garbage to appreciate the world. I mean, what sort of person finds value in their ignorance outside of the desire to find out the truth? Yes, I get a great buzz in trying to understand things that I currently don't. But what I don't do is sit around going, "Isn't it marvellous that I'm so ignorant?" with no intention of investigating the universe we live in. I also don't rely on our ignorance to argue for the existence of that not proven to exist. Our ignorance is just that. Our ignorance and not evidence of the divine, the supernatural, or whatever. As for pi and other numbers having no true end, again, I find myself asking, so what? I find it funny that you talk crap about the multiverse, which is potentially infinite, and yet you follow this with the proclamation that certain numbers being infinite equals the supernatural. Also, you do realise that one of the alternative naturalistic hypotheses for the universe's origins is the infinite universe, either looping or having come from a quantum state. Now, nowhere does that validate the supernatural. So that's a whole lot of assertion on your part, zero evidence or proof, and a great deal of disappointment for me and my viewers. Sure, it was something different. That didn't make it interesting though, as it was merely one baseless claim parroted as more than that. I've dealt with a lot of people asserting a lot of shit. There was nothing special about this, in any way. Hi there. I'd just like to say a few things here at the end of the video before you go. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who's ever donated to the channel via Patreon, giving a special thanks to the following people: Hannah Banghart, Matthew Kovac, John Schoenrock, Daniel Martinez, and Alexander Williams. Your support has ensured this channel its ability to grow over the years. I'd also like to ask that you comment down below and like this video, as well as subscribe, hit the bell icon, and follow Essence of Thought on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please also consider following Atheist Alliance International on Facebook, a humanist organisation dedicated to helping atheists around the globe. Lastly, I'd like to request that you treat the people responded to in this video with a reasonable degree of respect. Whilst we understand that there are justifiable limits to said respect when tackling certain heavy topics and anger can be a very genuine emotion in fighting injustice, any comments utilising language which insults others on the basis of perceived gender, sexuality, ethnicity or ability both mental and physical will be removed immediately, and the commenter may be blocked on the moderator's discretion. Let's work to keep this space one which upholds the values of humanism. Thank you.